I did prepare a lecture on classical text, actually, on Jimmy's honor too, because he's done more work on the 12 officials, and I don't think he's ever heard it in Chinese. You have what seems to me now somewhat of a new insight about the meaning of the chapter in general. You know, I always kind of focused on the definition of the function of each of the officials. And I realize, reading the text, as people are wont to do sometimes, that that's not what the Yellow Emperor is asking about. The Yellow Emperor is asking about the relationship between the officials, how they're connected.
As opposed to the function?
As opposed to their function. How and the basic import of the chapter is that the real problem comes when the connections between the officials are broken. That's what throws the whole system out of whack, or what he's most interested in anyway.
I have a very broad kind of question around the 12 officials.
Okay.
And it kind of started when I was in Mexico with Heiner. You know, that the text is not super specific around the roles, and that you use a lot of, life experience plus other studying to create this.
Plus a direct connection with the Yellow Emperor himself, who informed me
That's
on a
right,
higher level.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
To fill it out into something that could be used to really look at group dynamics. And so for months I tried on Heiner's view of it, which I think is kind of more traditional, sort of, perhaps, but using the metaphors or the characters, not Chinese characters, but the characters as in the kind of personality types of the roles in the group.
Functions.
The functions described in the way that you do corresponds to reality more, corresponds to what I see in group dynamics more. And but I wrestled with that for a while in how to explain that. That's a super broad general question. The question is
I interrupted halfway through. I mean, I gotta say, I believe that a certain amount of Uncle Bill's doctrine of the 12 officials is divinely inspired. It's coming from some other source other than the text. The text can be used to support it, I think, but you can't, without knowing the characters, you can't really get them out of the text.
It almost seems like you use the 12 officials as described in the Neijis almost as a language to express something that you saw that's real.
Yeah, basically my experience working with enterprises, groups of people trying to do something, and how they organize themselves and what different functions they take, which to me was the most interesting part of both cults and workplace environments and clubs. You see it take shape everywhere, that there is a need for organization and specialization of function. I am more and more convinced that the essence, say, of the Gurdjieff system, which supposedly came from this forgotten messenger, Ashiata Shamish, had to do with creating conditions within groups of people in which conscience was discovered. And I think that is, more and more, I think that is the part of the function of groups. may be the easiest, best route toward reality, but it is very difficult to be around other people and do things with other people. You're fast brought to the awareness that people are not very bright, or they have odd quirks that they have no control over. And it's very hard to work around other people for the most part. And I think that the culture is engineered so people don't have to actually be around each other, in a way that brings up the fact of how people are. But if one were to voluntarily choose to put oneself in a group doing anything, and if you're interested in reality, I think it can come through experiences with people in groups better than pretty much any other way. Long term, I prefer long term. Pilgrimages are really great because it happens very, very fast, but it's a little like acid. It's a little harsh and sudden. Long-term groups are more interesting in a way because people have lives that are outside, even primarily,
You definitely learn a lot about people over years.
Yeah.
You don't get with a group situation over a week or two.
Yeah. Yeah, you really, it's how different, you really get a different impression of somebody when you've known them for 5 years relative to if you go through some big experience for a month.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm always curious that there's 4 assignments to fire, and in the landscape of the 12 officials, what do you think about the fact that there's 4 roles designated to fire?
I think that somebody in China was very fond of making systems fit together in a way that reconciled oddities, like the difference between 5 and 12, 10 and 12. If you're working with 12 as a primary system, then you've got to have 12. And if you've only got 5 elements, somebody's going to have to.
Yeah, but still, I mean in terms of like the roles that are assigned to the heart, the pericardium.
I think the position in the hierarchy is what gives it away, and is partially more the most unique thing about the system. The fact that it comes in the order of the cycle, the controlling cycle. Fire controls metal, metal controls wood, and then there are 2 wood officials, yin and yang, and then there's the pericardium, the split yin fire, and is in the most central place in the body, really, but is the representative of the deepest place. But it's like in that hinge point. You need a counterpoint to the heart sovereign, though you need a yang too. I mean, that's a splitting of the 2 kinds of yin, 2 kinds of softness. I do have to come back to the fact that a lot of this stuff is, you read it in a book and you memorize it and it doesn't quite make sense. And I think that's generally what gives me possibility that it's credible. It's got to have things like that don't quite, it's hard to explain and they don't quite make sense. But they're significant, and it all makes sense in terms of different functions.
So you were saying about that you've recently discovered that it's about the relationships between them all?
Well, that's the question that's asked. He wants to hear about the 12 dong, sore places, the officials, their mutual connection, envoy. The zong is kind of the key word, because the idea of mutuality, that there is some sort of exchange, but two things are happening together, mutually, which is a fairly abstract concept. But that's what's being asked, is the envoy, the connections between them. How is it working? And the next line is interesting, because here he's talking about hierarchy. It starts with the idea of expensive and cheap, which has the abstract meaning of humble and eminent, but it's also good to bad, lower to higher, which is interesting. He's asking both about what their relationship is and the whole. How well does the whole hierarchy thing work? And for me, that's with the whole Pluto Aquarius question. It's we're a half cycle away from from Mao and Stalin and all of those guys, and I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that the wisdom of the people is even worse, depending on the circumstances and the times. But I think it's going to be a very disappointing period in terms of how humanity expresses its will or changes, how things are going to happen. But in any case, it's starting now, and it's crucial to that eclipse. It's hitting trine and exile to that eclipse of the moon. So something is very possibly revealed during that about how that's all going to come down.
Well, do you remember how Chris Brennan did that whole podcast on the royal family associated with eclipses back in October?
No, I didn't listen to that.
Oh, it was one of his best, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
I'll go back and listen to him going through Pluto through the signs.
Well, on Friday was Kate Middleton's announcement of having cancer and being treated for it 3 days before a lunar eclipse, and she was born on a lunar eclipse.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, anyways.
That is, I do think that it is not a waste of energy to keep track of royal families.
Why? Why do you think it's not a waste of energy?
Well, it's kind of also like with the 12 officials, like with the heart and the pericardium.
It's a signifier that life puts out that oftentimes corresponds with something bigger that's happening.
Yeah.
It reflects something bigger. Oftentimes scandals of people that are famous and the doings of famous people in general, I think, are. I'm getting more and more interested in fame, not personally, but just as a phenomenon. I think something is happening with Donald Trump that is beyond our understanding. That he is being infused with some sort of force, like something like Alexander the Great, maybe. Did there's a Netflix Alexander the Great. Have you seen that, Jimmy?
On Netflix?
On Netflix, I believe it's on Netflix. That could be on one of the others. I got half a dozen of them, but one of them goes through. I think it's Netflix. They use both historians and live actors, and they go through the life of Alexander the Great, which I just remember him from the fact that he conquered the world, and that Gurdjieff called him vainglorious and said he destroyed the remnants of what was useful on the earth. But he started out, Macedonia was this little tiny province of Greece. It was a nothing kingdom, and he had a mother who convinced him that he was the child of Zeus, that the king wasn't his real father, the Zeus, was, and that he was meant to rule the world. And then she took out the king and made him king, and he believed it, and he fucking conquered the world. Some force came into him against the Persian Empire, which was it was like a huge empire, the whole Mediterranean world. And he came in and took him out. and probably did destroy the remnants of a lot of valuable things in cultures. And at the same time, he set up this city in Alexandria in Egypt, in which all the different schools, ancient schools, came together to form the essential ideas of Western civilization. The whole, most of what we call the Greek view, the Platonic and Aristotle, those all came during the Hellenistic period in Alexandria, yeah. And that's where, of course, astrology was put together from probably Sumerian, Babylonian, Persian, not that much Greek, but it interests me because, I think that was one of the major enlightening things given to humanity that came from someplace at this time as a result of this guy that Gurdjieff claimed destroyed the last remnants of the possibility for humanity's salvation.
Yeah, it's like he broke everything and then mixed it together. And in that mixing together, most of our culture is, it's like a direct result of that mixing.
The whole thing, it's so hard to break away from the idea that it's mechanical, that there are forces that are interfering with what's going on this planet, and they're not what we necessarily think of as benevolent or evil. I personally do not believe in evil. I think it's a made-up, stupid concept, but there's definitely shit going on here that is not to my advantage. You see this link that Martha sent to this movie?
Mm-mm. I didn't watch. Was she on that?
It was on her. It was on her. It was one of the Facebook. It was this link to this new movie that's come out called The Three Worlds. So I think it's called
the three body problem.
Three Body Problem. Yeah. And so I foolishly watched the first. Well, I don't know, foolishly. I think it's worth watching the first episode anyway, just in terms of what may be coming and where we came from, because it's the most realistic scene of the Cultural Revolution that I've ever seen put on film. And it's Game of Thrones style. They don't spare shit, It's really just the way it was. It's ugly, ugly, ugly. And to realize, a whole generation of guys like Wong went through that. It was crazy ass. And the kids that were doing it, a lot of them 13-year-olds torturing their teachers, literally. and the one thing these old guys said, Wong's generation, they don't talk about it with anybody, because the fact is you're still living with these people. These are still your neighbors and people you work with and associates, and you saw them do incredibly crazy, brutal things. and I don't think it's because Chinese people are stupid and don't know how to govern themselves. It's quite the opposite. People don't think that kind of stuff could possibly happen here, where you have, fanatical groups imprisoning and killing each other. Okay, so maybe it's all this Pisces and Saturn and Mars.
It sounds like, the connection between what you're talking about and the 12 officials, it's like it's beginning to see the natural organization.
Yeah, and understand it from a different perspective in terms of seeing how it works, because different things are happening.
It's not this.
What was that?
That's the solar eclipse happening.
Yeah, that's
It's rough.
what I meant to go to. I was just going to give you a glimpse. It's the day before Monica's birthday,
Day
Yeah.
after.
a day after Monica's
It's
birthday.
gonna be a wild year.
And there's a conjunction between the malefics in Pisces. There's a sextile between Venus and Pluto, and then there's this triple conjunction exact to the minute between the Sun, Chiron, and the Moon on the day within a day or two of Mercury turning retrograde. Just before a conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, which is a once in a 14 years thing. It's a big deal. All happening at the same damn time. This is a fairly big astrological event. But like, the 1st of January 2020, didn't seem like it in the minute. You just have to look back in retrospect and see, oh yeah, something really weird changed there. And people on the internet, they're comparing this to that chart.
How would you look at money? I mean, it seems to me like the next year for a lot of people is going to the financial
That's a
world.
big thing they're talking about.
Yeah.
Is Jupiter and Uranus in
Uranus.
Taurus is going to very possibly could totally blow up something in the money system.
Which
Jupiter and Uranus. Jupiter rules wealth.
So cryptocurrency?
Cryptocurrency, where in Uranus rules cryptocurrency, basically. It's outlaws, break the system kind of energy.
Well, and like a lot of people getting rich and a lot of people getting poor.
In Venus's
Very
sign
quickly.
of
Very
Taurus,
quickly.
the Earth, love of money on the Earth.
But Uranus is associated with very quick, sudden changes. Like lightning comes in and it strikes something, it's in and out, but then what it strikes is permanently damaged. So it's
So
And do you make any, like, I don't basically know astrology well enough, do you make anything of the sun being trine its domicile
Yes.
in the second?
Yeah. It rules money in that way. So very, very likely whatever happens with that eclipse will be involved in money. I think that's a legitimate chunk. So this could, this is a really, really good time to have some underground hidden conspiracy take out the
RFK Jr.
what's that?
Take out RFK.
Yeah, maybe take out RFK. But, and that, eclipses of the sun are famous for taking out important people, but, important people can be like the king of Egypt or whatever,
exalted people.
Yeah, exalted people, but it might not be ours.
Well, that's what I was talking about with both King Charles and the Princess of Wales being announced to have cancer before these eclipses started.
Yeah.
Like days before. It happened on Friday.
Yeah, and it really it is interesting in that the royal English line is the only royal line in the world that has any kind of power anymore, and theirs is solely in terms of their press. Really is a very Neptunian kind of thing, and they do somehow represent something that's happening to the monarchy. The fact that there's the last vestige of it that's being eaten up by cancer.
Yeah.
Both the beautiful Princess of Wales, that's going to be the next Queen of England. She's probably going to die of ovarian cancer.
Probably.
And the king's not going to, Charles all by himself.
Well, and he,
and William all by himself, is quicker than anybody expected. And how's he going to do with both those? This is fantasy stuff. But I think
it's fantasy.
but I do think it's interesting what happens with, and people like that, big people.
Well, and King Charles's coronation occurred last year on the last solar eclipse in Aries, and he is the baby king in Aries. It's his beginning of his reign.
And this could also be connected, I think, in some odd way with the Pluto in Aquarius, because it's the opposite, it's something odd and hidden underground that's starting. And the fact is, the concept of royalty, the concept of noble blood, may well be legitimately coming back, and that's that's like the last vestige of it, and they're considered completely ordinary, and for all accounts are, but maybe there are bloodlines that do exist of superior kinds of beings on the planet that just generally hidden from us.
I've been saying that ever since I've known you.
Yeah.
This isn't a revelation of my crazy.
You say it once every 4 months, once a quarter.
Well, nobody believes me just because I have no actual evidence of encountering anybody particularly superior. They still only exist in my fertile imagination and dreams of the past.
Fair enough.
Connections with immortals whom I never met. This is tonight.
Wow.
This was Monday.
Monday, yeah,
Right.
tonight.
Tonight at
Right,
midnight.
Midnight.
23 minutes after, 23 seconds after midnight.
Yeah, it's funny because the sun's just in the 6th house, but actually it's only a few degrees from the IC, so it's actually very close to midnight. It's just the way the Earth is tilted right now. And it's in a good place for what Kendra and Martha are doing. That Pluto is going to shine very brightly on their
But after
lunar
morning, it was just like,
eclipse.
I'm afraid they're going to get kidnapped by Lunarians.
As long as they stay in their hotel room at midnight.
They're not in Shasta right now. They're in Ashland.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, I see. The lunar eclipse is happening at midnight.
right.
That's why we're looking at this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that we were just looking at is in 2 weeks.
It was the solar eclipse in 2 weeks. It's that everybody's all freaked out about on the internet.
So what should we do?
Nothing.
Tonight.
Nothing. You don't do
Okay.
things on eclipses.
Oh yeah, I do it. You hide.
You hide. You don't drink and drive. You lay as low as you can.
Well, and I think you
Yeah.
and you try to have an awareness of the hidden energies.
And just plain
The
chaos
occulted, yeah.
and accidents, especially in Aries. It's like, well, it's opposite Aries, but
Is my solar return is it gonna land on the 7th or the 8th? Do you know?
I do know. It's the day before the solar
Okay.
eclipse, and it's very different.
7th.
Yeah, it's on the 7th. And it's different than the solar eclipse, but you can see it's moving toward that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely connected with it.
I'm seeing, what do you think about this? I'm kind of seeing this analogy again with, the 12 officials and with, maybe not astrology per se, but with, the significance of the monarchy and Donald Trump and all these things. Almost like water going down a drain, where you have gravity pulling down and the water finds a way of organizing so that it can flow down into the drain as efficiently as is naturally possible.
Now,
So
you're thinking Aquarius here, or?
No.
No,
Just in general?
just in general,
Just
yeah.
the way it will naturally organize in a way so that it flows as efficiently
Yeah,
as
which
possible.
is a line straight out of Lao Tzu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where the Tao abides.
So, you're tapped in.
the place the water sinks down to.
Yeah, in the way, like the way it will organize in order to flow
Like a
as
vortex.
efficiently as
Yeah.
possible. And because that's the way that the group dynamic seems to me. It's like, it's as if the functions, the 12 official functions, it's like the structure of the twisting of the water going down. It's like, if it's not impeded, then that's the way that energy will flow as efficiently as possible. And if there's something in the way, then it's sort of like, putting your hand in there so that it doesn't drain properly, or it doesn't drain as efficiently.
And there's both a circular and a linear movement at the same time, which is interesting, and that's in that the control cycle, and the fact that when it gets down to it, water controls fire. So the people down on the lowest level actually, even though it's in the bladder that transformation of chi takes place, just like in a group of people, if the noble lord loses contact with the people, the general demos, then the whole thing falls apart, just like any of the other parts of the dynamic. So it's circular in that way, even though it's hierarchical.
And so then the pathologies are obstructions.
Or obstructions, yeah, blocks between the channels between the organs,
And so
which is the special provenance of the heart protector, the pericardium.
Is what? So you were talking about water controlling fire, and then you're talking about, I missed the leap there between that and what you were saying about the sovereign losing.
Well, and this again is just in terms of practicality. When you have a group of people doing something, no matter if the person who is in the highest position of power, if they lose the whole spirit of the group and everybody turns against them, they're fucked. And that's what controls them. And classically, that was supposed to be the job of the sovereign, was to be the protector of the people and have this relationship with the people that the officials in between, might be more harsh toward. That's the story of Dracula, the true story. He was not an evil guy. He was a descendant of the dragons, the noble family that came down from the Anunnaki and transformed the line of kings in the world. So he was son of the dragon, Dracul. And it was at a time with the rising middle class in Romania. The merchants that were selling out, who were exploiting the people and selling out the country to the Turks. And Count Dracul saw the misery of the people and basically hung the Bulgars, the merchants, up on spikes to warn the Turks that they can't mess with us, and saved the country. This is the story that's told in Romania.
Did Alex tell you that?
What's that?
Did you hear that from Alex?
No.
Oh.
No, they don't. No.
You're talking about Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler, yeah, who was a real historic character and famous for impaling the people on a stake, which he imitated from the way the Turks did it. That saved Romania from Turkish invasion, who were in collusion with the rich guys oppressing the peasants.
See that happening in the US.
And that's, in terms of what the noble royal lines tell themselves is that they're the real protectors of the interest of the people. There's more of a relationship between them caring and caring for people than the politicians that are actually running the place. But who knows? I do really believe there's an invisible hierarchy on the planet that does interfere. And the fact is, the planet is designed in such a way that it always has opposite effects. No matter how good something looks and starts out as, it turns out really crazy ass. Like the idea of communism, the idea of we'll all work together and share and there won't be any hierarchies and
Well, as you were talking about the water and fire, I thought of, again, coming back to Pluto and Aquarius, and it's interesting that Aquarius it's an air sign, but it's the water bearer and the sign of the people, opposite of Leo, who is the sovereign,
and it's the Saturnian control of the water of the people.
Right.
But it is connected with the masses.
Yeah.
Which in Hellenistic astrology, Saturn rules the masses, rules the ordinary people, rules the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And what rules Leo rules the royal?
Because it's ruled by the sun.
The power of life, and consciousness, and the king. Especially if it's the sun king. A Messiah initiated from the prophets, connected to the bloodline from above.
Zeus.
Right.
The hybridization of gods and man.
Well,
You can read about all this stuff in books.
It's funny. It's funny you talked about the politicians, though, are the ones that actually control the people because the metal generates water.
Yeah.
Who's wood in
The general and the champion.
like the army,
Yeah, exactly, the army.
and then earth is the
Cook and the servant.
but in a bigger sense of a whole. Like we're using like politicians, army,
Breadbasket.
like who's the people,
Farmers.
the farmers.
Well, if you're talking about inside the imperial palace, the official, it's the person that has control of the food.
I'm
Has the
talking
key
about-
to the granary.
Talking about in our modern society.
I think it is connected with the way we eat, consume, and deal with food as a whole, and the fact that the people that I come from, who are essentially tenant farmers, guys that rented a farm and had lived in a house and bought the machinery and paid rent on the farm, that's all gone.
Yep.
It's all food is produced by huge corporations with huge machines and big investments and their prices being manipulated and controlled.
So when you say it's the big players in the food system, not the
Yeah.
farmers, but the distributors, the
Yeah,
mega marts,
yeah, the guys that have the keys to the
McDonald's.
yeah, right.